plenty to talk about tonight with this broadcast. A lot of interesting stuff going on, and so let's talk about the games a little bit now, and then we'll get to midnight with his social media and what's been going on there. I know you've been able to talk about that a little bit on the Discord channel, but we'll get into it a little more, what people can expect and what we hope we'll be able to bring you guys during the season. But last night's game, and I'll start with you, Pucker. We talked about it a little bit in the post game, and it's been talked about a little bit more in Discord today. Not a lot of activity. I expected a little more after the first night of the conference finals, but I think more and more people certainly are starting to believe that Detroit needs to take both tonight, and even if they lose one, being down 3-1 to a really good Montreal team, that's going to be a really, really tough hole to dig yourself out of.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, it's going to be real tough for Detroit if they find themselves down 3-1 after tonight. This is 2 must-win games for them. They need to come out strong. It looks like tonight Detroit's going to come out with another hybrid lineup, or at least this first lineup is the same first lineup, or similar to the lineup that we saw last night in the first game. So it'll be interesting to see if they've made some adjustments to be able to hold Montreal to less than 7 goals, which is what they gave up in that first game. We haven't seen Detroit's second line yet, but I'm anticipating that they'll follow their normal routine. As far as Montreal, the thing that makes them so dangerous is that both lines are consistent. They're both putting up about 4 goals a game. Their forecheck is nasty. Their defensive unit is really solid. In fact, it's probably one of the best defensive units that we've seen in the Stanley Cup playoffs so far. Really enjoying what I'm seeing from Montreal. They've almost won the over. I'm definitely thinking that they've got the advantage going into tonight.
Now that you had a little bit of time to think about it, Best, how do you recap the first night of the conference finals? How much of a problem does Detroit have? And despite splitting last night, it still seems like St. Louis probably has the upper hand right now. With even though now they're not the home team, I guess, for these games, but coming back with such a strong second game. And fighting, obviously, tooth and nail in the first game. I really feel like St. Louis had the best of the play last night. What's your thought on both of these series after you had a little time to think about it?
Well, at St. Louis, Vancouver, I think St. Louis is going to win it, but I think it might go the distance because I don't think Vancouver's going to go silently, not one bit. Do I think they will? And Detroit, I heard you was talking about them changing their lineups. I hope they did after last night. They need to do something to try to get back into that series, or it's a wrap really quickly. That's my take on it.
And I'm not sure how much you've had a chance to. Well, obviously you're busy with your series, but I want to talk to Midnight a little bit about St. Louis and Vancouver. Obviously, that first game of double overtime was a real struggle early. We talked a little bit about that first period where it was a 4-2 St. Louis lead. A lot of scoring early on in that game, and then it settled down and both teams got a little more defensive. Does this still play in the favor of St. Louis right now because they seemingly can score at will, or does Vancouver have a chance to try and do what Minnesota did for a little bit, which was play more defensively and try and cut down on their offense and maybe the offense overall in these games if they're going to have a chance to beat them?
Well, I definitely don't think you want to get in a shootout with St. Louis. I think we've all kind of seen that happen and see how powerful St. Louis's offense can be. I think the key for Vancouver to maybe get this series to go the distance or even possibly steal this series, which I think we can all agree it would be a steal, they have to keep St. Louis uncomfortable. I think we've seen at times when St. Louis gets uncomfortable and kind of gets back on their heels a little bit, they start to kind of struggle to find the back of the net.
Well, both these games hopefully starting up shortly. We're about 7-8 minutes away from the 9 o'clock hour, and I know teams are starting to get together a little bit. Saw a little bit of practicing going on before we got to air today, and certainly from what we see now, and you can make sure we can double confirm this with you with the starting lineups of that Montreal and Detroit game. I think we saw lineups there. I'm trying to get to it right now. We see Detroit and Vancouver. We see Detroit's lineups. We see Vancouver. Do you have a starting lineup for this 9 o'clock game that we can talk about? I'm sorry, midnight. I meant.
Are you speaking? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
For Montreal?
Yep.
We are gonna have to make a last second lineup change, but I do have a lineup that's gonna be going for the game 3, and it's gonna be left wing's gonna be Ehans, center's gonna be down south Killa, right wing's gonna be Vikings, which is he's gonna be playing his first games in these playoffs. Left D is going to be Messiah, and then right D is going to be the change, and that's going to change to Dakota Pye, who played in game 1 yesterday.
Okay.
And then goalie will be Cav Relix.
We've seen a lot of teams. I mean, we've seen a lot of games, at least in the second, and already last night in this conference final round, where teams have had to take penalties because of issues with lineups, because of disconnects, what have you. But the lineup at this point of the season, it's incredibly tough to get guys to sometimes to stay focused on what's going on and be available. How much of a struggle has it been for you with this Montreal team? Have things been pretty easy going, or have you had to juggle players a little bit here and there?
For the most part, my team's been pretty good with lineups. I keep my 2 lineups the same. First line, my first line, my second line, both lines, I keep them the same. And then depending on what they can play, I'll put them in those games. And then I generally will have my D partners separate, my D pairings, and I'll just flip them wherever they can play as well. So for the most part, it's been pretty smooth, but we've had our falls here and there. We took a penalty yesterday just because I was stupid enough to not enter a lineup in time. That wasn't their fault. That was my fault, but we got through it. But for the most part, it's been pretty good, at least on our side.
And on the other side for Detroit, we have posted as a 9 o'clock game lineup of it's Days, Stepdad, and Zomboy up front for Detroit. B. Berg and MNMZ on defense, and Burmeister in net for them for this game number 3. And I think we might have had the Days, Stepdad, Zomboy for game 2 last night. Is that the case, Pucker? I think or at least part of that line was in game 2 last night.
Yeah. So that looks like that. They had Thompson and Zomboy. Their left wing was bare that game, so there's a little change at left wing, and they have a different defensive unit. So it'll be interesting to see how this line fares against the Montreal forecheck and their average of the high-powered offense that they've been able to be consistent with.
What do you, Bess? What do you expect tonight with Detroit and Montreal? Montreal being up 2-0. We've seen this Detroit team show plenty of firepower, and at times when they need to play better defense. I don't know if defense is a huge factor for them. Obviously, in the first game they had a struggle stopping Montreal's offense, but that second game I think is more in lines of what we expect out of that series: a 2-1, a 3-2 a 3-1 series. It feels like Detroit needs to maybe work a little bit more on what they're trying to do offensively because Montreal's defense has been so good. What's your take on what you think Detroit may need to do differently tonight?
Well, I know last night I saw a lot of breakdowns in Detroit's defense. Like, I don't know, letting people get behind them too easily. Like, they definitely got to tighten up their defense in their own zone. I mean, the first game they played was a mess. I mean, they definitely tightened it up in the second game, and I expect them to try to continue that in the third game. It's going to be difficult, though, against Montreal and the scoring power they got on that team, but I expect them to try.
I think you hit it right there on the head. I think you're absolutely right with what you said, Best.
And on the other side, again, Vancouver played tough the first game, and it's always easy to get your guys motivated to play a first game. Both sides obviously showed up that way. They were ready to play hard right from the beginning, and we saw a couple of teams really battle, get crazy offensive the first half of that first period, and then both teams seemed like they got the directive to settle down a little bit. Vancouver off a big win, off a double overtime, probably somewhat emotional win for them. Not able to really match up well with St. Louis in that second game. It's a 1-1 series, but it almost feels like St. Louis didn't play well enough to really control that first game the way we'd seen them do it so far in the series, in this postseason, Pucker. And I think, if St. Louis, in my mind, gets back onto that kind of pressure offensive game where they're really pushing it hard and can really control Vancouver's offensive push, this could be a very quick series. Now, we saw Vancouver handle the St. Louis offense fairly well for a little while, for most of that game, except for the first period. I'm not sure that, if St. Louis is really firing on all cylinders offensively, that Vancouver's going to have enough to stop them. How do you see Vancouver's ability to stop what we know is a pretty powerful St. Louis offense for enough games to win this series?
Yeah, and this is going to sound like I'm biased towards St. Louis, but the fact is that St. Louis, as long as they do not beat themselves, have the full package: offense, defense, and forecheck. So as long as they don't get in their own way due to maybe availability or even EA connection or anything like that, Vancouver is going to find it really hard to win any games against them. In game one, we saw a forward that hasn't played a whole lot of center, play center for St. Louis, and just watching him play, he definitely looked like kind of a fish out of water. And it goes back to when you get familiar with a specific position, you kind of get used to playing that. And then when you switch it, it just changes your game a lot. And I think that's what we saw. They were able to make some astute adjustments. They didn't change a whole lot of the guys in their line. They just changed the positions of the guys that were playing. And that was really the only difference between game one and game two. And the difference on the scoreboard was crazy. In the game two, St. Louis dominates both sides of the puck and score 5-1. In game one, it's a nail biter going into double overtime. So it's I think that's the key, is that St. Louis has got to keep from beating themselves, and as long as they do that, then they'll find themselves in good position in a couple more games.
What's your take as well on that, Bess? What kind of chances Vancouver have of stopping St. Louis for what would need to be at least 4 more games?
Well, Vancouver came out firing in game one, just like I knew they would. And just because of all the hype around St. Louis, I know I'd be hyped to play them, But I think they have to build on what they did in the first game. Like, whatever they did in the first game worked against St. Louis. They need to replicate that from here on out and do whatever they can to replicate that, because whatever it was, it worked. They need to get back to doing that, exactly that. Because they didn't do it in game 2.
Right.
And that's kind of that feeds back into what I was saying. St. Louis didn't change anything from game 1 to game 2 other than their positioning, and they played phenomenally better. So that's why I go back to saying that unless St. Louis beats themselves up, that Vancouver is going to have to find a whole nother level to their game that we haven't seen them play the entire season.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right.
The Red Wings seem to be all set, ready to go. We'll wait for Montreal, and we know that they were needing to get a sub in there. So when that starts up, we'll see Montreal probably take a penalty to start that one. So hopefully once Montreal's ready, we'll get this one started in a minute or two. Meanwhile, still waiting to hear something from Vancouver and St. Louis. I know we have a couple of streams to look at here, so we'll be able to bring something up for you soon.
Excuse me.
And hopefully I know that they were practicing a little while ago, so hopefully they will get ready and get ready to play this game shortly. But games 3 and games 4 tonight, best of 7, and obviously Montreal, Detroit, Montreal having a chance to close it out. I have a hard time believing, guys, that Detroit is going to get shut out 4-0. Montreal has the capability. I don't think it's beyond reach that they can do it. I just feel like Detroit's offense and the way that they've played so far in this playoff, it's hard to think that they would go out 4 straight. How big of a surprise would it be to you, Pucker, if Detroit were to not win a game in the series and be done after tonight?
I think it would be a huge disappointment for everyone involved in Detroit. I don't think that locker room would be fun to be in if they lose 4 in a row. But I have faith that they'll figure some things out. They were able to see what Montreal did a little bit last night, and really Montreal's line from game 1 to game 2 isn't all that much different. This line is a little bit more defensive oriented, a little bit less offensive firepower. So Detroit definitely has. This is the games that they should win and can win. So I'm pulling for them to make this series interesting.
How shocked would you be, Best, if you saw Detroit go out tonight?
I would be honestly, I would be really shocked because they have really good players on the team. They have it's Dave. He was one of the top scorers in the league. So I would be really shocked if they went out, if they got swept.
All right, still waiting.
They do get swept.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think if they do get swept, I think it's one of those things that you got to give the credit to Montreal's overall team defense, and they're able to keep some of the highest scoring guys in the league to like 1 goal for game 1, game 2. Then they're doing something right. Absolutely. In Montreal, and that's going to make a really fun matchup if it does what I predict, which at this point I'm almost predicting St. Louis and Montreal for the finals. It's going to make a really fun Stanley Cup Finals.
High scoring Stanley Cup final, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be fun.
I don't know. I think Vancouver, I think they can pull it off. They have a big hill to climb, but I think if anyone has a shot, it would be Vancouver out of the 2.
Oh, you think Vancouver has a better chance to beat St. Louis than Montreal does? Okay,
Detroit
I know. I see what you're
Montreal,
saying.
yeah.
Okay. So I got a question. Out of these 4 teams, who is the team that right now is showing you that has the best chance to beat St. Louis in a 7-game series?
Montreal.
Yeah. I'm kind of right there with you. I'm right there with you.
I mean, what we've seen so far, I mean, Vancouver might put up some type of fight, but I think it would be Montreal, Detroit, the way they've been. I mean, we only played 2 games yesterday, but the way those 2 games were played, I don't think they would I don't know. I think it would be Montreal.
Yeah. How about you, Sibs? Any thoughts of who do you predict is going to go to the Stanley Cup from here with what we saw from night one, and who has the best chance to beat the team of the town, St. Louis?
I tell you what, I am old school. I'm firmly in the camp of if you have a good enough defense and good enough good goaltending and good defense, that you can stop a high-powered offense. Now, I've seen teams fail with that, but I feel like Montreal just has such a great balance of all of that. You know, we saw that with that 7-1 win last night over Detroit. And they, a little bit harder game trying to score in game number 2. But game number 1 against the Wings last night was a blueprint of what Montreal needs to do if they're going to beat anyone out of the West. Because, quite honestly, Vancouver showed that they can put up goals as well. And they've got, they've scored a lot as well. They have not been a team that is that has struggled. So I think Montreal has a tremendous good chance of beating either one of those teams, and I think I think they'll get past Detroit. I think Detroit would have to do a lot to beat Montreal at this point, and I think when the time comes, whoever they go up against, even St. Louis, I think they have a good shot. I think that series, St. Louis and Montreal, if it came down to it, would be a 6, probably a 7-game series. And it would be probably, in my mind, it might be the better matchup to watch of any of them. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be really interesting if it comes down to Montreal being in any of these games. And as we talk about Montreal and St. Louis, they're getting Montreal and Detroit getting underway right now. So that game just getting underway. We'll get a St. Louis and Vancouver game shortly. I know St. Louis is surging at this point, so we will...
just ended their warm-up game.
Yeah. So they will hopefully be jumping into that quickly.
That's interesting that Montreal did not take the penalty off the... I'll have to talk to them and find out, what transpired. There was a late-minute adjustment. I wonder if they ended up being able to go with their original lineup. We'll have to look into that.
Yeah, I haven't been able to see who they have out there on the Montreal side, so if you're able to pick up who they have, and it was a defenseman I think they were concerned about, right?
Yeah, let me jump in the line chat, and I'll take a look and see what the details to that was. Oh, okay. So Midnight Flapper said no lineup changes needed. Both original lineups stay, so that's why they didn't take a penalty.
All right, good. Oh, you hate to see somebody lose right off the bat on a penalty. And there you see Detroit getting the first tally, getting on the board quickly. Fighting for their life, really, at this point.
Absolutely.
I was wrong, boys. Vancouver's game went to OT. My bad.
Yeah, they're still in there. They're still in their practice game. So this is where
Detroit did score. Oh, here we go.
If it goes to overtime and you're tied, you shouldn't lose any CR. I think that would help guys quit out.
Oh yeah,
that's gotta be a
absolutely.
penalty shot.
Wait,
What? That's not.
that penalty?
I thought it was a penalty shot. He was all alone there. Well, close to being all alone.
So the Wings on the power play now with a 1-0 lead. So we'll have some staggered games tonight. At least we're going to get at least one period, I'm sure, in. And there you go. Good rebound right out in front. Looked like the goaltender was there to make the save, but he found the 5-hole. And Detroit finding a 2-0 lead here. Really in a must-win situation in my mind.
Love the defensive man crashing in the net right there. Always love it when the defensive man gets a greasy goal.
Another power play for Detroit. So Montreal, someone imploding in this game number 3. It's okay if you lose this one in a close game, but you hate to lose it big time. And right now, down 3-0 in this game. And quickly Detroit is on top of this one.
Yeah, Detroit's doing exactly
Montreal.
what they need to do.
Yes. Yes, they are. Montreal called their timeout.
That second
Wisely
game last
called
night was
timeout.
pretty even, though. I mean, not like they had an advantage or anything.
Yeah, I want to see Montreal settle their guys down here and come out a little bit stronger defensively, starting after this bad penalty kill, and tighten up.
They just called a
discipline.
timeout.
Yeah, they need to tighten up with discipline as well, for sure.
Now after the
They don't wanna be
timeout,
taking-
yeah, we'll see if Detroit can keep this barrage going. Yeah, you know, if Montreal lost this game 3-1, 3-2, you could live with it going into Game 4. If they get the daylights kicked out of them in this one, it's again, it's tough to come off a bad loss and feel good about another game, even though you're up 2-1 in a series.
Yeah, because they gotta play again. This line is going to be playing both games tonight, and so when you lose the first one bad, you go into the second game with a little chip on your shoulder and a little bit more pressure to win that game. Whereas Detroit's going to be coming off of a big win, and they'll be more comfortable.
Montreal gets themselves on the board now, and they now down by 2, so let's see how quickly they can get their way back.
Looks like that timeout served them well.
Why's mine ahead?
Looks like the Blues and the Canucks are about ready to get going here, so hopefully we have a game to show you.
Passing one off now to Hansen. Moves to the corner. Doesn't get the shot off.
Yeah, we're almost on the same page.
Nice.
Scooped up by Mitchell.
Good save.
Wonderful save. What skill by both goalie and shooter.
I think we need to keep an eye on Detroit's right defense. It looks like Montreal's finding a way to get behind them and then put the center in tough position, happen to take the puck carrier, leaving the slot wide open. So I wonder if Detroit's going to be able to make that adjustment to settle down and go back towards the net.
Directing that one to Ben.
Vancouver
Gains that off.
and St. Louis is just starting.
That pass behind the net. Looks out in front. Nice.
We'll keep on the first period here. We'll get you over to the West in just a bit. Although, let's take a look at a quick breakaway here. Vancouver comes in, and a miss on a pretty clear breakaway for Vancouver, trying to get on the scoreboard right away. And we'll head back over to Detroit and Montreal now and close out the last 3 minutes of this period and then get you back on the west side. Meanwhile, St. Louis came down the other way and scored, so the Blues open up the scoring here at 17:49 left to go in the first, and up 1-0.
That's not what Vancouver needed.
Gathered up again.
And Montreal getting a little bit more offensive now.
Oh, boy.
Call. The goalie is off.
Tough couple of minutes to start that game, but they are starting to do more offensively. They've got another
28 showing on that clock. And finally,
power play coming up now. And they'll finish out the first on a power play, but we'll have a bulk of it to finish up with in the second period.
focused on the power play. Let's see if it pays off.
The power play's excited to get out there. Those guys just about scrambled onto the ice as they get their initial chance of this game.
So first period over, and you see Detroit still leading this one 3-1. After one, we'll head over and watch Vancouver and St. Louis in this game and get a little taste of what's going on there. We told you St. Louis has taken an early 1-0 lead, coming off a breakaway that Vancouver had missed, and then they came back with their own goal.
Back in its own end, trying to work forward. Best part of the cake, worst part of hockey. Ice.
Ellis shows courage here after being banged up earlier on the shift, guys. He still gets his way to the puck and blocks that shot.
Good face-off win. And he fires. Nice work by Bernie. Muscled right off it. Has that one measured at center. Looking to Alexi. St. Louis will lug it in the neutral zone. Got it in his own end. On to Ellis. Cuts off the pass lane in the defensive zone. Puck is thrown to Lotz. Loose puck. There was no getting through. Did not get anything up. Great save at the edge of the crease.
Great display of goaltending right there, Doc.
Slid to Ellis. He scores! That one went off.
And St. Louis has now put themselves up 2-0, you see. And I haven't seen an awful lot out of Vancouver yet in this game, in this first period. So St. Louis has been able to play the game that they want to play, and continues to be a struggle for them offensively. Got the boys back here now, so
There it is.
getting some drops out of the PlayStation. Sorry about that, guys. Best and Pucker back with me again. St. Louis, as I mentioned, just taking a 2-0 lead now in this game.
Straight Montreal's 3-1.
Detroit just started a power play there. A couple of minutes into the second period there, so Detroit with a chance to extend their lead.
And Vancouver's keeping true to form. They're putting lots of pucks on net, and we'll see if that pays off this game.
Laid on to Lotz. And he's tripped, and there'll be a penalty. Blues have been handed.
Now Vancouver with a chance for a power play coming up here.
Vancouver's power play.
And Detroit's on their own, so why don't we do a little split screen and show you both games. St. Louis and Vancouver on your left, and Detroit, Montreal on your right.
Gotta love the split screen. He's a fan favorite for sure.
Well, none of these guys hate. They all hate losing their airtime, so.
Get a minor penalty for charging. Good face-off win. The Canucks through the neutral zone have possession.
That's pretty sweet how you can do that.
Puck loose, strong defensive play by Alexi.
I think one of my favorite things about the split screen is that you're still able to see both games very clearly. When you get to the quad box, it gets real small.
Yeah. Yeah, that was more for just for fun a couple of times, but that was hard to watch. It feels like you're watching bugs on the ice there.
St. Louis scores again.
And you see that one. St. Louis with yet another goal in this game have taken a 3-0 lead. So both games kind of dominated by the lead teams right now.
And we've got Montreal in the white and blue pants, and Detroit's wearing all red tonight. I like these the colors a little bit better than we saw last night. Oh, no. Am I wrong? Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah, Detroit's in red. Yeah, you're right.
And St. Louis, another goal, up 4-0 now in this one.
Oh, Vancouver. What are they? They're breaking down.
It'd be interesting to be a bug or a fly on the wall in Vancouver's locker room if they lose both games tonight. It'd be tough for them to come out and put out a good showing for Game 5, I think.
Yeah, that's not good. So what do you
really good? Go ahead. I was saying that was a really good scoring chance by Detroit. Slot was wide open, cross crease pass. It bounces off the post, and Detroit wants that. I'm sure they want that one back for sure.
Watching Detroit-Montreal right now is Detroit with another power play here, more than halfway through the second now. Still leading 3-1, slowed down a little bit offensively now. And Montreal needing to kill a penalty again.
And really there was a defensive breakdown on that last entry for Detroit, and almost led to a really good scoring chance for Montreal.
And St. Louis has just put another one up on the board. We'll kick over there for a second, take a look at that one for a little bit. But a hat trick on the board for St. Louis as they lead 5-0.
It's almost an exact reverse of what we saw last night. Last night, game one, Montreal was the powerhouse putting up 7 goals. And tonight we're seeing St. Louis show what they're made of and already got 5 goals and early into the second period. This is what this team has done. They've put up goal after goal after goal. Definitely the most efficient offense in the league so far.
Yeah, they're putting on a clinic, so to speak.
No power play for Vancouver, but down 5-0 right now. They're going to need some really good play to get something going here.
Yeah, at this point, Vancouver just wants to stop the bleeding. Whatever they can do to get a goal and stop this bleeding is what they're hoping for in this power play.
Give you the split screen once again, and maybe give you a little bit of audio from the Montreal-Detroit game as well.
This is a good point to hear from Ray Ferraro.
Martinez has rocked several players. When he is this physical, the opponent always takes note of where he is on the ice.
Okay, Ray, let's see how it goes for him.
Detroit struggling on their power play to really get anything going in this second period. In the first, they were on fire and were able to capitalize on every chance. So far this second period, they haven't been able to capitalize like they did in the first.
You know, we've seen Montreal really balance the defense and offense pretty well. And to start the game, they had a problem with that. I think they're playing more of their game now, but they struggled against Detroit right out of the box, and we're not really playing the tight defense that they're known for. And now they're struggling to try and find enough opportunities. Here's a bit of a 2-on-1, but good defensive play by the Wings to come back and help out. So now
Vancouver put one up.
Yeah, and then Vancouver gets on the board with a power play goal.
Yeah, my bad.
And the pass goes back over the blue line, so they have to recoil.
Yeah, I think Detroit got all 3 of their goals in the first couple minutes of the first period, didn't they?
Right, yep.
Yeah, the first 9 minutes. Then Montreal took a timeout. And whatever they said in that timeout definitely helped, because since then we've seen a different team from Montreal.
Yeah, I was going to say, definitely turned around over the course of the game.
See, not many shots on goal. Detroit only 8 shots on net, 3 of them going in. A little more physical by them, and time on attack is close. So Detroit playing a little bit more of a hitting game.
Third period.
I think what you can take away from that box score there is that Montreal's starting to win in a lot of areas, and they need to continue to do that if they're going to come back in this game.
Time of possession has been in their favor, but they're still down. Puck loose, denied by the defense. Right near the line. Take off, loser.
And that is a solid hit in the middle of the ice. The puck carrier drops his head for just
Wow, St. Louis is getting a chance to kill several minutes on a 5-minute major power play. Haven't been able to put one in just yet, and one gets kicked in, but it's getting waved off, as you see. So more than likely, yeah, sort of directed, kicked in twice almost by the Vancouver forward. He stopped his first kick in and then went with another. So it's probably not going to count, but unfortunately, Vancouver really can't do much offensively with an attack if you're killing a 5-minute penalty. I've seen more majors in the last week or two than I think I've seen several months before. I mean, it's been quite a few that have cropped up in the playoffs. It's kind of surprising.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if there's been a tuner and there's been a change to the majors, as many as we've seen recently.
Most likely. I've seen them in drop-ins earlier today too. They called. I think I only played drop-in for like an hour, and there was 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
That never happens.
And Detroit, good offensive pressure, good rebound again, getting a puck on the net. Have now gone up 4-1 here in this third period. So they're doing what they need to do to stay in this one.
Yes,
Yeah, it was
they
a
are.
great flurry by them. It looked like 3 or 4 shots back to back to back, and finally found the back of the net with the 4th one.
Yeah, they're definitely showing that desperation that we expected.
Montreal, good offensive opportunity there, getting the puck moving around a lot better than they had been. Now Detroit, another senseless tripping penalty by Montreal. Detroit, another 2-minute power play. So they get something going offensive finally, and then another trip. Meanwhile, Vancouver gets off the 5-minute penalty. They're going to go back in the box for another 2 for delay of game. So we're not seeing the prettiest hockey tonight, are we?
No,
That's 9 minutes so far for Vancouver that I can count.
You know, that goes for the last round as well. It seemed like there was lots and lots of penalties by both teams, and that's not what you want to see in playoff hockey.
No, penalties will bury you very, very quickly.
It's funny, typically, if you look at power play numbers in this game, you don't see a big up spike in taking advantage of that for many teams. If you see a team that does really good on power play opportunities, it's a rarity, and those are the teams that you're going to see do well in the league. So I almost feel like not enough teams have a good power play strategy. Nobody really thinks about it. They know they got an extra man, and they know they can hold on to the puck a little bit longer. But as far as setting up players or finding, you know, at least a simple give and go type deal, I don't see a lot of teams really doing that.
Yeah, and I think the teams that struggle, I think what you'll see is that they struggle against the trap generally already. And then when most teams end up with a man down, they hunker down, and all 4 of them end up at the blue line. And some teams just don't know how to handle it when there's 4 guys at the blue line. And that's the reason why in playoff hockey you see a lot of teams implement that trap because it's so effective.
And some real, again, great passing by Detroit. Good, quick passes. And they're getting their shots off so quickly. I, again, hate to be a goaltender on Montreal at this point because Detroit is really connecting with their passes and getting off some really quick shots. Now 5-0, 6 minutes left to go in the third. Detroit pretty much has this game sealed up, and they're going to at least come back for a Game 5 tomorrow night. And Montreal finally works their way in for a goal, too.
Gotta say, barring a miracle, Detroit will have this one wrapped up. But we've seen crazier things happen. This game's not over.
Absolutely, it's not.
Yeah, Detroit definitely does not want to sleep because they may find themselves in overtime.
Hans has both goals for the Montreal Canadiens tonight.
Detroit's in control of the puck in their own end.
Oh, they better. Oh, good pickup, good pickup.
Tell you what, we'll bring you that last 2.5 minutes of that game on its own right now. We'll get back over to Vancouver and St. Louis in a minute.
There you go, boys.
And there's Detroit with another goal. And
it
looks like a timeout happening here.
Looks like Montreal is more of the puck carry, do-it-yourself, get on my backpack style right now. I wonder if they'll change that the next time we see this line come out. which is going to be the next game.
Yeah, it's not been their typical control of the offensive zone for them. So it's been very interesting to see what Detroit's been able to do in this. After last night, I questioned if they were going to be able to come back and really take control of a game tonight, but they've been able to do it so far.
Yeah, it's almost an exact reverse of what we saw last night in Game 1, except for it was the other team doing it to them. So they definitely got their revenge tonight, putting up 6-2 so far.
St. Louis has absolutely shut Vancouver down so far.
Third period just started there with St. Louis still up 5-1. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's the style of play that we've come to expect from St. Louis. When St. Louis doesn't score more than 3 goals, we're kind of like, what's wrong with them? Are they they're gonna have to reset or something? But no, they're doing great, and they definitely love to see what they've been able to do this Game 3.
Do we know who scored Detroit's goals?
I've been trying.
Yeah, I don't have that information. So it'd be nice to be able to see if we can get that. Detroit, meanwhile, putting another one up there, 7-2 now, and like you say, getting a measure back of what they lost last night in that first game.
Yes, they are.
Another power play
It's almost an identical score too. It's crazy. Yeah, and Montreal's going to have to go back to the drawing board with this line. And it'll be interesting to see if Midnight Flapper decides to change the lines up, because we know he currently has the same line planned for both games. It'll be interesting to see if he lets this line play game 4, even though they're probably a little rattled after that one.
Yeah, hat trick for Zomboy, 2 for It's Days on that line. So 5 of their 7 coming from those guys. Yeah, Days 2 goals, 3 assists. Zomboy, yeah, Zomboy 3 goals, 2 assists. So yeah, those guys. I mean, you expect that from that line.
Absolutely. Now that was Montreal's second line.
So Midnight Flapper says that there's not a first line or second line. I just call it the second line because that's who played second.
Line A, line B.
Line A and line 1. that was line. Was line 1.
I thought he was going to say line 1A and 1B, but he said they're both line 1, which is slightly confusing, but I get what he's saying.
Yes, no, I understand. I get it. Because we did that on our team. Our team, we didn't have first and second lines. It was line A, B, and C.
When you've got that kind of depth, it just pays off so well in this playoff hockey, because you could have a bad EA bounce, and if you don't have that other line that can pick up still a win, it makes it tough. Your first line has to be perfect. But when you're as deep as Montreal is, you're able to lose a game here or there due to EA and come back and still win the series.
I think we were just putting another one up.
7-1 for St. Louis. Five goals there.
Yeah.
Interesting score.
I'm sure White Knucklers will be feeling good when he jumps in the chat here in a couple of minutes and joins us. He had a big game tonight.
Metcalf playing, I know he's on their team. He's pretty good. I like it last night.
Anything you do once, you can do twice. Let's see if that applies to this particular.
It looks like they're going Detroit's going with the same line.
So for Game 4, yeah, they're talking Bear, Thompson, and Habs Rule up front. The Professor and TJ Army, R&D, and Fat Boy in net. So that's who Detroit's saying is going for the next game.
And if I'm not mistaken, we've seen this line put up some high-scoring games. So it'll be interesting to see if they're still able to do that against this line that is pretty sound defensively for Montreal, or who struggled tonight defensively.
Side to side they go, trying to generate something. That's a free puck thanks to the play by Bernie. That's a good solid poke check. Has that one and holds. Blitzham slashed another player after the whistle. Looks like they might go.
You cannot swing your stick like that. He knew exactly what he was doing.
They win the draw. Great defensive poke. Got that pass off the boards. In the slot. Wonderful save. He was hovering right over it.
Long power play for St. Louis here. Another major
Left the zone, and so
for Vancouver. That's 2 majors for them in this game alone.
the Blues with a
Yes,
neutral
sir.
possession along the wing. Pass attempt to Alexi.
That's a lot.
Laid on.
So
I
now
want
2
to see
games.
what they're.
Shot.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, I'm
Wonderful
sorry.
save. What skill by
I was
both
gonna
I
say,
was just gonna say I just would.
good. You go. You go this time. I swear, you go.
I was just gonna say I'd be interested to see what their Vancouver's penalty minutes are at the end of this game.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye out for that one and get that information. But yeah, it's that doesn't help. I mean, at this point, 7-1, it's not not much of a chance you're going to come back in it.
rides the line.
But it's just bad habits.
Low off the post. Puck collected.
It seems like they've
Yeah.
been on the penalty kill all game.
Canucks have it at center ice. Trying to go to Ellis. He's got this one. He's
Another
got
break for
it.
St. Louis here,
Pushed
and
away.
getting stopped. Under 5 left to go in the third period. St. Louis winding their way to a 2-1 series lead here. Really controlling the game the way we've seen them do multiple times in the first couple of rounds.
Picked up. That should be a penalty.
Even when Minnesota played them well, they'd have games where they really got beaten up. So St. Louis can do that to you. You can play well and stay with them and have an opportunity to do something, but it is it only takes one more game for St. Louis to come back and beat the daylights out of you, and that's the part I would have a problem with. And Minnesota kept their heads about them pretty well with it. Wonder what Vancouver's going to do after suffering a couple of defeats here, last 2 games that were pretty decent. A 5-1 in game 2, and now what is at least 8-1 right now.
Yeah, this is just a clinic that's being put on by St. Louis. St. Louis is just dominating the play on both sides of the puck, and they're just outplaying Vancouver. Vancouver just didn't come out like they wanted to, and they just haven't found that next gear to be able to find a way to put the puck in the back of the net. Definitely some adjustments that are going to be needed to be made for Vancouver from the disciplinary standpoint, as well as their offensive strategy going into Game 4.
Tremendous hit.
Under a minute now left to go in this one.
Sending a message not to the other team, but to his own team.
And I think this is maybe the most we've seen St. Louis score. I'm not sure if this is the highest scoring game they've had in the playoffs so far. We have to look back.
11-1. 11-1 was their highest
That's right.
scoring game.
It was an 11-1. You're absolutely right.
Game 1 of round 2, I'm pretty sure.
It's a way to change momentum in a hockey game.
And that's what St. Louis can do if you let them. You don't want to sleep on them because they'll put it on you. And they're pretty relentless. They don't care how many goals they get. They keep going for more.
Final.
You know, some teams,
Go ahead.
good.
He regathered it.
It's,
I was just going to say, I don't even know what I was going to say. Go ahead.
well, final seconds ticking off. That's all I was going to say. And it is final now. An 8-1 victory for St. Louis in this game. And they have now taken a 2-1 series lead on Vancouver, as you see now. Montreal up 2-1, losing their game number 3 tonight by a score of 7-2, and a 8-1 victory for St. Louis in this game. So tough game number 3s tonight that we got to see. Some difficulties for the losing teams trying to do anything to shut down what was going on. So we will see how well the losers recover in game number 4, but that's a tall order.
Absolutely, it's gonna be tough for Vancouver unless St. Louis just shoots themselves in the foot. I see them winning this series in 5. I expect them to come out. I think White Knucklers is going to join us here in a second, so we'll get his take on what he expects from Game 4. But really, unless St. Louis really does something differently and looks uncomfortable like they did in Game 1, Vancouver's going to have a real tough time finding a way to beat them.
It's a really demoralizing game to lose like that. It is incredibly tough to get beaten up like that and come back. We saw St. Louis beat Minnesota in Game 1 in their series, but Minnesota came right back and played well and took a victory in Game number 2. So, I mean, it's certainly possible, but you definitely want to be able to regroup and say, look, this is a loss that we can't think too much about, and we have to move past it and get ready for the next game.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to have that short-term memory. You got to put this one behind you. You got to talk about what you guys did well. Try to find some areas where you can do better. With all those penalties, I think they won't have to look very hard to figure out what they could do better, and come out with Game 4 and put a better show out there for sure.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I'm not sure what they can do better. It is a tough break there, and like you said, penalties a big part of it. But it seemed like the pace of the game was what St. Louis wanted, and it just was tough for this Vancouver squad that went in Game 3 to deal with it, to hold up to it. And again, St. Louis has done that all playoffs long. I think you have to play incredibly defensive. I think we saw Minnesota do that. It kept them in the games. It didn't give them a lot of offensive opportunities, but it kept St. Louis off the board a good deal. And to me, it's really the only way you have a chance to beat these guys.
Absolutely. And I just got a message from White Knuckler. He's willing to jump in here. We'll shoot him an invite. I suggested him best if you could add him to the chat. We'd love to have him in here and get his take on how he thought Game 3 went. White Knucklers was able to do some damage. He put up 2 goals and 4 assists, and then RV Clutch came in big with a 5-goal game, 3 assists. It's average. Put up 2 points, 1 goal, 1 assist on the right wing. It's Rafel put up 2 solid points with assists, and then it's Skosh put up three assists. All of them offensively just played extremely well, and all around they played extremely well in game 3. Look to see more of that in Game 4.
Yeah, you see four. Yeah, you see 4 saves by It's D's in goal for St. Louis on obviously a total of 5 shots. Meanwhile, 30 shots on the other side for the Blues. That right there, almost tells you the whole story.
Yeah, and just the dominating performance. 10 minutes time on attack, 81% passing for St. Louis. A couple penalties, but not nearly as many as Vancouver. I think somebody asked about that earlier. And how many penalties did Vancouver have? And they had 22 penalty minutes. That's insane.
Wow.
Really?
And cannot do that in Game 4.
Well, we know they had a couple of majors. That was 10 right there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's still 6 other penalties in addition to the 2 majors.
I know.
That's wow.
That's
I
insane.
bet they's on the penalty code the whole game.
We got White Knucklers in here with us now, so we'll talk to him about that. But I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
Yeah, White Knucklers, welcome to the show. Glad to have you. What was your take from Game 3, and what do you think you're going to do in Game 4?
What's up, boys? Good to be back on the show. Best. Nice meeting you.
What's up, brother?
Yeah, no, it was a good game. I don't know how much you guys watched of it, but Clutch, he was fantastic that game. He was drawing penalties all over the place, getting good zone entries. Their right D at first was playing him tight. And then after probably 4 or 5 rushes, he started giving him a little more respect. So that opened up the left side, and we were just cruising down that side every time we could. Yeah, if Clutch continues to play the way he is, and I lock down the center and facilitate those 2 wingers and defensemen, I think we'll be fine.
And now,
you guys definitely looked
go ahead. You
solid
go
in that
you go,
first
Parker.
game. I was just going to say you definitely looked solid in that first game for sure.
Yeah, Clutch and I have pretty good chem. We've played together in the FB League and just in some club games, so we have a lot of games together.
I get the feeling a bag of pucks and Clutch would have good chem. It's no offense to you, but he is a damn good player, and what makes him better is if he's got line mates who understand what he's capable of doing. You obviously benefited from it tonight with a couple of goals yourself. What's the lineup for Game 4? How many did I have?
I think 2.
Yeah, you had 2 goals, 5 assists, if I'm not mistaken on that. So.
I had 2 and 4. And
2 and 4. There you go.
3, so,
2 and 4. Yeah.
So it was a good game. We put up some points. And right wing was getting open. He did a great job, and then our defenseman locked down. So it was a good performance, and we're looking forward to Game 4.
Yeah, we talk about 8 goals, but again, you mentioned it. 5 shots total against Vancouver. 8 goals or not, cut your goals in half, cut your shots in half, and you still beat them pretty handily. Your defense, not getting, a lot of times doesn't get the recognition they do. Talk about how well you guys played Game 3 defensively.
I think the best defense we have is controlling the puck in the offensive zone. I don't know what the time of attack was, but I'm sure it was pretty lopsided. I don't know if you have those numbers.
Yeah, I'll get those for you. 1 second.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was controlled pretty well. They took 2 majors, which was a big momentum boost for us. It was time for us to reset, really look at their defense, see what they were doing on the PK, and I think that's going to pay dividends moving forward.
Yeah, it looks like St. Louis led the time on attack 10:45 to Vancouver 3:23.
Right, and after the first period, it was about 2.5 minutes to a minute. So we really controlled that game in the second half. But yeah, Game 4, I don't know what the lineup is for them. I don't know what the lineup is for us. All I know is I'll be playing center, and I believe Clutch is left wing. So we have us 2 in there. It's going to be tough to defend, and we've pretty much seen every looks in this game. So however they try to defend us, we'll figure it out as the game goes on.
And
I think
go ahead.
The lines for Vancouver are coming in right now. I see St. Master typing in the chat, so we might be able to get that to you here in just shortly.
Your lineup the same in this next game, Knucklers, or is there any changes?
I'm really not sure. I know we were looking for goalies, but like I said, I'm definitely in the game, and Clutch is left wing. I think he's in a VG game right now, so we might get a late start, but I know 100% we're in the game.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like your forward line is identical to the game in 3. The defense is going to switch out. In Game 3, it's Rapel and it's Scotian, and you're going to get Josh the Boss and Nasty Uncle Dad. And we've seen Nasty Uncle Dad do some pretty good work on the ice, as well as Josh the Boss. So even though you guys switch defensive cores, I don't expect there to be a lot of change to your productivity and your overall defense.
Well, I think that helps our team. I have a lot more chemistry in games with that D pairing. So whatever you just saw there, I think it's going to get better.
So could you predict for us, what do you think the end score will be for Game 4?
I'm not going to put a score out there, but I think you're going to see a lot of the same, us controlling the game, a lot of offensive zone time, and it's just a matter of us getting those greasy goals, or if Clutch, where I think he's one of the best in the world, is in tight, just in front of the net, making moves, and more importantly, finishing.
He definitely knows how to finish, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you give him the puck with space, he's going to do good things. So that's kind of my role, is play a good two-way game, shut down their center, and help our defensemen out. And then when I get the puck, facilitate, hit the man that's open, which is usually Clutch. And, he's a great player. He'll find a way to make plays.
Well, again, after two pretty handy, pretty handable losses to Vancouver, what do you tell you guys to not get overconfident? Because we've seen Vancouver, look like they may be struggling. We thought maybe they'd have a tougher time against Anaheim. This team has come back and has played well when they need to. What do you tell your guys to keep them from feeling too good about the last two wins, quite honestly?
No, we're fine. We're a confident group, but we're not cocky. And I've been through these cup runs. I've had a couple rings on my fingers. So just stay calm, take it game by game, and we're fine. Our locker room is very relaxed, and we're confident, like I said. And we don't take anybody lightly, especially after the last two rounds.
Let me ask you a question. Out of the two teams in each, which one scares you the most?
I haven't watched too many of the games, but it seems as if Montreal probably has the better balanced team. I don't know what they have for the second line, but their first line took it to Detroit's first and second line. But I think Detroit has a good balance, but I'd say Montreal has the slight edge, but I like our team over both those guys.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I've been rooting for St. Louis from the beginning, but Montreal's starting to show us some things that may make this a fun contest if we see them in the finals against you guys. It'll be
how did that game 3 go with Detroit?
Game 3, Detroit did exactly what they needed to do, put up six goals and only let 2 on the other side. So Detroit wins 6-2 pretty handedly.
Yeah, so then you'd probably have to look at who did Montreal play? Did they max their guys out? Are we going to see their depth the rest of the series until Game 7, if that happens? So, and I know Detroit's going with the balanced attack. I think the first line has 2 games played and their second line has 1. So just a little different strategies there from the owners. But it should be a good series. But my series, I see us controlling this and finishing off in 5 or 6, I hope.
Well, I think Detroit balancing their lineups, if it was to happen to win this series, would be a big reason why they were to win, if they won.
Yeah, and it's owner preference. I've owned teams and gone all the way, and it's just a matter of who you're playing against. And really, home ice is huge. The first 2 wins, you get momentum. The other locker room can fall apart. Your guys are confident. And that game 3 is just as important. So that's big for Detroit. They had to sleep on an 0-2 series. They're down in the series, so they had to sleep on that. I don't know what the vibes were in their locker room, but obviously they came out and played well. And like you said, they it sounds like they won by 4 or 5. So that's a big win.
Yeah,
that's a huge win. Now, talking about these lines, it looks like Montreal is doing their first line, 2 games on the first night, their second rush, 2 games on tonight. So, and like you said, we've seen a pretty balanced attack, but both lines will be at 2-2 once this night's over, no matter where this series is at.
Yeah, so I mean, as you guys analyzing this series, it's tough because you don't know the depth of these teams and who played when, and that's huge. You have guys that have certain chemistry. Some guys are simply just better. So it's going to be interesting. I see that going 2-2 after tonight then, after hearing that news.
I was going to say they certainly need to. I think Detroit definitely does not want to leave tonight down 3-1 in the series. I think if they don't find a way to win this next game, I think they're going to have a real hard time finishing out this series.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a must-win because line 1 on the first night dominated Detroit's both lines. So if they don't get this win, it's probably over in 5. So yeah, definitely a crucial game 4 coming up for the Wings.
Do you put? Did Montreal use their top line twice yet, or just once?
Sounds like twice on the first night.
Okay, so they can't come back.
Last night.
All right, so yeah, I mean this is the risk you run there, and certainly you take a 2-0 lead, but the risk you run there is you have to get to a Game 7 to get back to them, and you know obviously Detroit has to win the next 3 to avoid a Game 7, and likelihood of that is tough, but. You're still taking a chance that you're able to at least take one and get a Game 7 if you're Montreal.
It is 3 games per player, so they can come back.
Okay.
It sounds like they're going to come back Game 5 with their first line. That would be my thought.
Yep. And then they couldn't play again until Game 7.
Yeah, I think that Detroit will have the Game 7 home ice advantage. So we'll see how they, if they can stretch this to a 2-2 series, how they choose to mind match against Montreal.
How you guys been? I miss being on here talking NHL with you guys. What have you been up to?
Well, you have to stop losing. You have to stop winning games, and then you can come join us.
Right.
Yeah, I've been busy. I was busy yesterday, and got focused for the first game and joined you when I could.
Yeah, it's it's been interesting. We're getting good feedback from people who are able to watch the broadcast tonight. We appreciate them. Of course, some people may not be the biggest White Knucklers fans, but you could check that out on YouTube here. Go to the
Am I getting bad reviews?
No, one person is not a big fan of yours. Go to WEHL Sportscast on YouTube. If you're happen to be watching this on Twitch on my channel, you can always watch it over on YouTube. We prefer you over there so you can see the league chat that goes on during the games. And we always post them in Discord, so if you're on the Discord for the WEHL, we always throw that in the general discussion, the league chat area. We throw it in there before we go live, so you can always get the link there. We try and promote it on our other social media platforms, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We are, again, on YouTube, WEHL Sportscast. You can find us there. On Twitter and Instagram, it's WEHL Official. And on Facebook, you can look up World E-Hockey League, as you see right now on your screen, and join what is a private Facebook group. But if you're part of the league, certainly, or looking to join the league, certainly you should be approved. So go to any one of those places. We'll be posting links for our live broadcast, for the shows that are coming up, the shows that Fort and Chow do every weekend to talk about the upcoming playoffs, the end of the season. And so we've got that coming up again this weekend, and I'm sure they'll do one to close out the season after next week's finals. Again, we'll be on with all the games of the finals next week. We'll be doing play-by-play coverage of each game in there and have some fun calling that. That'll be a blast for you folks who have not seen us call a game live. We will do that for you next week when the finals are going on, and it's always fun to see the action and to be able to do some of the post-game interviews after a team has won. That's a lot of fun to listen to. We'll get the winning team on. We'll talk to them.
Apparently
for a while.
Not.
No. Why is that?
It's someone commenting, not a White Knucklers fan. So
yeah, no, not a fan. Oh well, it happens. Even I
can't please everybody.
Even I don't have my fans. So again, you guys, played what is really, honestly, probably a perfect game going into Game 3, playing this game, an 8-1 win, everything going right. Is there still anything that you have a concern about going into Game 4, going into the rest of the series with Vancouver? Is there something that you still want your guys to be focused on every game, no matter what the score was in the last game?
Yeah, just everybody holding discipline in their positions and running our trap correctly, moving up the ice as a unit, and everybody just holding their lane. So just keeping structured in our game and consistent. That's the most important part, especially throughout a series.
And not underestimating the other team as well. Part of that.
Yeah, I mean, we never do that. So EA bounces happen and momentum changes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you just got to stay disciplined. Like I said, disciplined in your positions and keep a consistent game. Really the key.
So, Knucklers, were you able to see Game 1 and Game 2 for your team? And if so, what was your take from Game 1 and Game 2? And what was the locker room like after that Game 1 double overtime loss?
I unfortunately didn't get to see the games. I was busy, and I haven't been too active in the Discord, so I wish I could answer your question, but I can't.
Fair enough. Well, they definitely found a way to come back and win that. Now, this is going to be your second game tonight, second game in the series tonight. Am I correct there?
Yes.
Okay. Well, definitely expect you guys to be able to do what you did in Game 1 with the offensive prowess that you guys have shown throughout the playoffs. Yeah.
Yeah, we're certainly going to try. And like I said, I expect us to dominate the possession. It's just a matter of keeping them out of our house and our zone, meaning in front of the net, and avoid those bad turnovers and try to limit those EA bounces. So hopefully we put up 5+ here. And, again, that's the goal. And I'll talk to you guys later.
All right,
luck, buddy.
Appreciate it, White Knucklers, joining us here on the post game. And hopefully we've got some games coming up very soon. We see Montreal waiting for their opponent right now. We still waiting to see what's going to, with the game going on with Vancouver and St. Louis. So hopefully we get something to show you there shortly. I know RV Clutch is in this next game, but I know that he's still delayed, so that might be a little bit of an issue for St. Louis for this game. Until he can finish out the game that he's in right now. So we hope we have something to show you with that soon. But right now, still nothing going on with that game, Vancouver and St. Louis, yet.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing these streams pop up here in a second. Don't know where to go next.
Yeah, we're going to try and also get back in here with Midnight Fapper as well. If he has a chance, we'll try and talk to him a little bit about social media. When we can, if he's got some time. Meanwhile, we are still waiting for Game 4 to start up right now. Just to recap what we saw going on in Game number 3, it was an 8-1 St. Louis victory in that. And in that game, 30 shots to 5 in favor of St. Louis, as we've already spoken about. Hits 25-8 in favor of Vancouver. So they were trying to be physical. They were trying to slow down St. Louis, but it wasn't to be their success in game number 3. St. Louis time on attack 10:45 to Vancouver's 3:23, and again another big telltale sign. Even with all that time on attack and shots on net, 81.3% passing. So you talk about everything going right for a team. They had 22 penalty minutes. We went 2 for 8 on the power play. And they were doing everything right. And Vancouver gave them a lot of opportunity for odd man chances with all those penalty minutes. So about as perfect as St. Louis could hope would happen for a game, and it just went incredibly well for them in game number 3. And Vancouver needing to come back and just forget about this game and head on to game number 4 and try and steal one back the other way. Meanwhile, on the other side, Detroit with a 3-goal effort from Zomboy along with 2 assists. It's Days with 2 goals, 3 assists as well. B. Berg, MNMZ also with a goal in that game. Everybody had a point on Detroit's side. 2 goals for Ehans, but not nearly enough as Detroit beating Montreal in that one by a score of 7-2. Detroit out shooting Montreal in game 1, 24-14. Much more physical, 28-10 on hits. Montreal actually had more, about a minute and a half more time on attack, but it certainly was Detroit holding on in their zone, getting physical with Montreal, taking more shots on net, and that equaled the best game certainly we've seen them play so far in this conference final. And Detroit now looking to try and get it at 2-2, and I think that's going to be incredibly important, guys, because it is really not something that we want to see a team, they don't want to see them themselves after a game like that fall back to 3-1. It's still just as important to win this game. I think we've been saying that the whole time. You guys feel any differently about that?
No.
No, I think I think you hit it right on the head. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for Vancouver, and I think that Montreal and Detroit is definitely the more interesting series now. Last night, I thought Vancouver and St. Louis was going to be the more interesting, and tonight St. Louis has turned it on, and Detroit and Montreal is starting to show us what we all predicted, that this series could definitely go to a Game 6 or a Game 7, depending on the breaks.
Detroit's still waiting on a couple of players, so when they get them in, they'll get going. Montreal is ready and waiting, and hopefully that'll happen soon. Detroit looking for one more player now, and that has happened, so I think they are going to get going here shortly. And we'll at least be able to watch that game right now. Nothing yet on Vancouver and St. Louis. It's like Vancouver has everybody in their locker room. They're still waiting on St. Louis being readied up. So that happens. We'll be able to talk more about that once it goes on.
Yeah, they're getting started here pretty quickly. We're hoping at least, and definitely dominating performance by St. Louis and Detroit both. St. Louis putting up 8 goals in Game 3, and Detroit putting up 7 goals in Game 3. It'll be interesting to see if Detroit is able to find a way to put that much offense up on this Montreal team, who hasn't traditionally allowed that many goals. Definitely looks like Montreal may have a few kinks in their armor, and Detroit was able to find a way to exploit those kinks in Game 3. So Game 4 should be an interesting must-win game, and we're looking forward to seeing how it plays out.
We thank Connor Thompson for the feed from Detroit, and this game is underway now. Montreal and the Red Wings.
A neutral zone interception. Moving it to Hansen. Right on his stick from the left wing. Intercepted that one at an important place. Read that play in his own end.
Oh, really?
Bear cut through the neutral zone. Didn't handle it very well. Free puck. Right near the line. Can he keep it going?
Oh, Detroit scores.
Flings it. Score! They have struck early in this one. The Red Wings have broken the tie. Perhaps they can build on this lead.
You got to give it to Detroit for moving the puck to the open ice and being able to put the puck on net and finding a little bit of space in front of the net and burying that puck.
They sure are, aren't they?
The Red Wings carrying it in their own end.
There he goes again. There goes Red. Red almost buried that. Lost control of it.
He's talked about having a physical presence. He got the message. That early hit sets the tone for his team.
Montreal's got a minor for slashing.
Detroit wins another face-off.
Their power play unit for the first time.
Always important to win the special teams battle, or at the very least, come out even.
Detroit on the power play here. Let's see if they can get anything done.
Save there.
Montreal clears it.
In their own end and in possession. Still more time killed as they have to drop back and regroup. Pass off the woodwork to Jack. Pass attempt to Jack. The Canadians killed it off, and so we're back even. Parent pass to Hansen.
Montreal killed the power play.
Montreal's doing a great job of, starting to tighten up defensively. This is kind of what we saw in Game 3, where Detroit comes out firing, and it took Montreal a little while to tighten up defensively, and that's kind of what we're seeing at the beginning of Game 4. Be interesting to see if Montreal can tighten up enough to come back and get a lead in this game.
Drilled into the turnbuckle. Hope he's okay there. Not only have to worry about the big hit, but that stanchion as well. Out in front. Wonderful.
Detroit trying to clog the middle, but they're collapsing too much on their own goaltender and almost let up an easy goal there.
Brings it in for an
Sure did.
Yeah, you never want to let the puck carrier get that close to your net. You really got to get aggressive at some point and kind of pick where that spot is, and just when they start getting bearing down on your goaltender, you gotta get a little bit more aggressive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, their defense and on the last play especially, their right D collapsed maybe a bit much. So be interesting to see if they continue that.
In Montreal in Game 1 and 2, were able to identify which side was weaker, and once they did, they started taking advantage of that. It'll be interesting in Game 3 and in this Game 4 if they're able to notice a weakness in the Detroit defense and see if they can start to exploit that going in deep into this Game 4.
We've got St. Louis and Vancouver getting underway now, and we'll be showing you that one shortly. Hang with this game for a bit, give you a few more minutes.
puck is thrown to Jack. Takes it in from the neutral zone. Picks it up in his own end. Oh,
Okay, I got it.
as they travel in the defensive zone. Pitching this one to Bear. Blue line control. Missed all of it. Has that pass off the boards. Twist one. Got his pad on a changing shot. That's the end. Good work by Jack. Uses his stick and strips him.
Been a quick first period in this game so far.
Montreal's got it in their
Yeah, not a whole lot of stoppages. Puck has been moving a lot.
looking from the corner. Whistle is blown. The penalty will be handed on. The Red Wings get a 2-minute penalty for tripping. The Canadians are
So the Canadians on a power play, they'll use up a chunk of it here, most of it in the first period. You love these late period power plays because that last minute's always slow, so gives you actually a little more time.
They could use a little luck to climb into the game.
Get you over to Vancouver, St. Louis here. We'll watch the last 45 here of this period. And we may catch a St. Louis power play as we get back to that.
scooped up by Hansen. Shoots. Wonderful save. He was hovering right over it.
Yeah, Montreal's going to want to find a way to tie this one up at the beginning of this next period for sure.
Absolutely.
And so 1-0 Detroit. Will switch over now. Half of the first period just about over here. St. Louis with a minute left in a power play, and they will continue on with this, and we'll take a little peek in here to this game for a little while and get you over back to Detroit and Montreal in a minute. We'll give you a split screen as well shortly. Let you take a look at both games while they're going on. Meanwhile, let's take a look at St. Louis and Vancouver.
We get a shitty bounce in there.
We got some comments from White Knucklers there.
White Knucklers here.
He's on the broadcast, whether he wants to be or
That
not.
happens.
Nice tie.
Shouldn't have forced it. That's my bad.
Somebody tell him not to badmouth Best while he's doing this.
or anybody, yeah, for that matter.
Yeah.
Best said or else.
I've never seen anybody get banned from a league for what they say in a podcast, but you know, it's certainly possible.
First for anything, right?
Yeah. It's not past Knucklers to do something like that. So. I think he's too focused on this game, actually. So.
Sorry about that.
I was gonna say it's not normal. I played in leagues with Knucklers before, and it's not normal for him to actually even be on the mic. More often than not, he'd prefer to just keep it quiet, focus on the game, and just bury the pucks. And that's what we saw him do in Game 3. So if he doesn't have a whole lot to say, don't be surprised.
Montreal just opened up the second period, still on the power play with a goal, so that game tied up at 1 now.
What the fuck, man?
We'll give you, I tell you what, we'll give you the split screen now so you can watch both of these games. Montreal, Detroit on the left side of your screen.
What, the helmet? Really?
We'll keep listening to St. Louis and Vancouver right now, but we'll watch both games. It's probably tougher to capitalize on a power play when you start getting deeper into the playoffs, but when you can, it is a huge advantage because there are opportunities that, you know, one of those opportunities that doesn't happen too often. Detroit had a partial 2-on-1, couldn't do anything with it. Now a loose puck in front, and Detroit close to taking the lead again.
Yeah, I've started to notice a trend on St. Louis's power play after getting to watch 22 minutes of their power play. In the last game, I'm kind of starting to get a theme of what they like to try to do. They like to get the puck back to the point and then put a puck on net when they've got a body in front of the net for that strong deflection. And it's paid off for them in the first in the Game 3. We'll see if they're able to do that in Game 4 as well.
That was good work, boys.
See 5-2 shots on goal for St. Louis, double the time on attack so far for the Blues. So still playing their game, but hasn't resulted in any scoring yet after one. A little bit more reserve play by both teams. We'll keep at it right now so you can look at those stats until
Good
the
looks for those tips, too, boys.
next period starts up.
A little bit farther, so I'm not fucking tipping it into their goalie.
Vancouver's doing a better job of protecting the puck than what we saw in Game 3. In Game 3, they were kind of sloppy with the puck. I think their passing percentage was either 70 or 60, so doing better in this Game 4, at least in this first period.
Second period started up for St. Louis and Vancouver now. About a 10-minute difference between games, so we'll see if that catches up, or we may wind up seeing St. Louis and Vancouver finish out the night for our play. A good opportunity for the Blues up close right in the slot, but not a clean shot taken, covered up by the goaltender, and we'll move on to a face-off.
And that's what St. Louis does so well. They're able to get that puck down low, really close to the goalie, and make it hard for the goalie to make that save. Goalie's been playing great so far in the first 2 periods. We'll see if the Vancouver goalie can keep the puck out.
And as you say that, RV Clutch puts St. Louis on the board with his first goal of this game. Loons having a little trouble getting some support there while he's in net for Vancouver, at least in the last minute or two.
That's the key. You gotta keep a hold of your guy. You can't let him disappear on you. You can't get laxed on St. Louis. If you do, they'll find a way to get to the soft spots and just beat you up.
That was a beautiful play.
You draft? That's fair.
It may not be reserve play, but we're definitely seeing a little bit of slower play in both of these games as I'm watching them. I think Game 3 on both sides was a lot faster by both teams. We're seeing a slower, more patient, a little more deliberate. I think we saw that last night between Games 1 and 2 as well. So I don't know if guys come out pumped in Game 1 and then kind of figure they're going to make some minor adjustments and slow the game down a bit, but we see it again happening tonight. Second period almost over, as you see, with Montreal and Detroit tied up at 1.
The way St. Louis moves the puck, it's just so beautiful to watch. They're really tough to beat just because they're just so good with the puck in the offensive zone. They hold on to it for extended periods of time until they just find that great scoring chance, and then they bury the puck.
Fucking dumb.
These are very defensive games.
I just made a shit play, babe.
1-1.
Vancouver's doing a good job of kind of clogging the middle, but St. Louis, if you give them enough time on the outside, they're going to find a way to get the puck to a greasy spot and get a decent chance.
9-8 shots on goal, Montreal against Detroit. 4:54 time on attack for the Canadians. 3:14 for Detroit. Physical game is pretty even. 1-for-1 on the power play for Montreal, and that's been the difference. Meanwhile, Vancouver is able to sneak one in and tie this game up here late in the second period.
And it's kind of like what we saw in Game 1, they were able to do a long stretch pass from their from Mr. Malachi, and their left wing was able to get the puck in deep, and then that led to a great scoring chance and ultimately a goal. So they're going back to that long stretch Hail Mary pass, and it paid off in this second period.
Detroit almost buried another one. Well, almost took the lead.
You see that third period has started up in that game now, so Montreal and Detroit still tied up at 1.
Oh.
Oh, I should have.
Wow.
No, just curved me.
St. Louis, meanwhile, trying to take advantage of our power play.
How much team went behind?
Delayed penalty coming up now on Montreal, so as they touch up, the Wings will get a power play here. Very critical at this point.
Love it.
They need this win. This power play could be a big part of it. And we will watch this from the box.
The more I watch this second line of Montreal, the more impressed that I've gotten with them. They move the puck well most of the time, and even though they had a really tough Game 3, they're coming out and firing on all. Well, they're keeping it a tight defensive game in Game 4.
Fuck you, fucking goalie.
St. Louis, a couple of good opportunities there. And Loons is trying to stay pretty centered in net for the Canucks. He's not trying to make too many moves. Meanwhile, Montreal has killed off their penalty. Detroit not able to capitalize on it, so it'll go even as we see St. Louis, Vancouver wind down in the second, tied at 1, and it'll go into intermission with that.
Both these games are tied at 1. Very, very defensive.
And probably rightly so. I mean, it's, you got a couple of teams that are not wanting to make too many mistakes. Obviously, down, nobody wants to be down 3-1. So you've got Detroit and Vancouver playing a little more reserve. Vancouver really has to against that St. Louis offense. I don't blame them at all for doing that.
No, you can't go toe for toe with St. Louis because you're going to lose every time. Maybe not every time, but
10-3
I don't
shots
think
on
it's a
goal.
winning strategy.
Yeah, 10-3 shots on goal for St. Louis. 8:03 to 3:11 time on attack, also in favor of St. Louis. So again,
Detroit just
still been in their control, and you see, Detroit just getting on the board halfway through the third now, taking a 2-1 lead.
Goes back to getting that puck to the greasy area. They put the puck low on the goalie's pad and follow it up with a little tap in and find a way to score late in this third period. Now they just got to hope that they can hold on to this lead and go from there.
And Montreal, a penalty shot, but not capitalized on. Golden opportunity to tie this one up, but good play by the goaltender. Fat Boy keeping his ground and not allowing much of an opportunity there. Vancouver, meanwhile, has gone ahead 2-1 in this one.
And that was two big saves from him back to back, right before he had the penalty shot, and then immediately following during the penalty shot. That's huge, huge saves to him.
Oh, fucking force.
You hear St. Louis maybe getting a little frustrated.
I hate myself.
Should we start getting into the points or no?
RB clutch with a hot take, kicking himself a little bit.
And Montreal with a long shot from the point, tying this game up, sliding through the 5-hole, and I don't understand how that went in. The goaltender was right there for it.
Looks like Vancouver's up as well. How did they score?
That was during the penalty shot. We kind of lost track of that goal, but yeah, they tied that up a couple of minutes ago.
Oh, okay.
Vancouver's winning 2-1.
Yeah, I'm sorry. They went ahead 2-1. My bad. Meanwhile, the Montreal Detroit tied up at 2-2.
Well, I was just going to mention that they're both Detroit and Vancouver doing showing their desperation for sure, man.
We're going to watch Montreal and Detroit, just that game for now. Plenty of time left in the St. Louis game with Vancouver. We'll want to watch the last 3 minutes here of this Montreal-Detroit game, and then we'll get back over to Vancouver and St. Louis. St. Louis has just tied that game up as we went away for it. 2-2 now, 11:05 left to go in the second period. But let's stay on this Montreal-Detroit game in the last minute or so in regulation and see if it goes to overtime that way.
Uh-oh. Nice save.
Defensive breakdown by Detroit. Almost led to a Montreal goal there.
Yeah, the goalie made a big save on that one.
Getting down to 20 seconds left in that third period. Montreal still swarming now. And Detroit coming out. Can he get a break here? Pretty much a break. Shot goes way wide. 5 seconds left to go before we hit overtime.
I think Montreal got a piece of that.
We'll get back to that game in a second. Let's head over to St. Louis, Vancouver. 5:11 left to go there. And we'll watch this one for a couple of seconds. And we'll get back to a split screen, show you both of these games, since one will be in overtime and the other one might get there.
Well, coming into the games tonight, I was talking to the professor, and professor in a before the game interview said that he will not lose another game this series. They're currently in overtime, so let's see if he can stay true to his word and win one for Detroit here in overtime.
Overtime about to start, as you see on your left side of the screen. Detroit, Montreal tied up at 2. St. Louis and Vancouver tied at 2 as they approach the 1 minute mark remaining in the third period. Such a close opportunity for Detroit there.
Montreal's recoiling back in the defensive zone. He chipped that one off the boards and ahead. That's a pretty sharp play. Maybe he was a little...
See 43 seconds left to go in the St. Louis-Vancouver game. Third period. Tied at 2.
And Detroit's playing that 5-guy back neutral zone trap pretty hard. They definitely want this win, and they're doing everything they can to get it.
36 seconds left in the Vancouver St. Louis game. 2-2.
Vancouver's doing exactly what they want to do. They're keeping it nitty-gritty. They're keeping this game tight, and this is the way they're going to win these games, is making them go to overtime, getting a lucky bounce, wearing St. Louis down. That's how they won game 1, and looking like that's how they're going to give themselves a chance to win game 2. You got to give it to them for not giving up, after, the poor performance in game 3. St. Louis is real comfortable in these types of situations when they're in overtime, though, and I expect that they still have the advantage and have a very good chance of finding a way to bury this puck.
It is overtime for St. Louis and Vancouver, tied at 2. 15-8 shots on goal in favor of St. Louis. Time on attack, almost 7 minutes more for the Blues. Couple of good hits by Vancouver. We saw a few late in that third period that stopped a good opportunity for the Blues, so their physicality's helped out a bit in this game. That overtime is about to start. We'll go back to split screen here in a second. Montreal, some good opportunities there, not able to capitalize.
I think Detroit's playing a little bit of tight point so that they can get their breakout going. I'd like to see them kind of collapse a little bit more. Montreal's been able to put so many pucks in the back of the net. I'd like to see them tighten up a little bit more and do more of a collapsing defense on moving forward.
I'm really surprised both these games are tied 2-2 and in overtime.
Yeah, after game 3 on both sides, you're wondering how teams are going to come out. But, yeah, they've made it an interesting game 4 on both sides here.
Haven't they? I'm really sure this doesn't happen very often.
And I think this is more of that traditional playoff hockey that you kind of expect to see. Low-scoring affairs, a lot of defensive, stands from both teams. Vancouver's going to get a good. St. Louis is going to have a good chance here on this power play.
It reminds you of real hockey, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Definitely real playoff hockey. That kind of tension in these games, and no one wants to lose.
Oh, good chance here for Montreal.
Dogged determination there by Ben. Montreal's along the wing at center ice.
St. Louis a good chance, a deflection off a shot from the point on the power play, but good save again by Loons, able to come up with it. Positioned well in net. Meanwhile, 4.5 left to go in the first overtime. Montreal and Detroit still tied at 2 as well. been impressed with the chances that Montreal has gotten in this overtime. They've done a pretty good job to hold on to the puck a good deal.
We have.
How about their defensemen cutting off these outlet passes that the Wings are trying to make? It's 2 in a row now.
They've been doing it all game. I've been watching them. They've been trying. Detroit's been trying to go up the left side all game, and they've been keep cutting it off every time.
As a defensive man, when your winger is that far up, it gets a little frustrating when you lead to a couple of turnovers back to back. I wonder if they'll adjust here. The way I like to adjust when the wingers are too far up is use my D partner to move the puck up the ice and then make that pass a lot shorter.
Or the center drop down.
Yeah, absolutely, and get some help, support from the center.
Absolutely, that's usually what I do when I have stuff happen to my team because I play center. So. Vancouver's laying the body.
And St. Louis off a deflected shot and somehow found its way through the 5-hole, and they take this game number 4, 3-2
with the goal.
We'll flip on over now just to Detroit and Montreal as this one is with a minute left to go in the overtime. Number 1.
Oh, that was such a good chance right there. It was a bad penalty by Montreal right there.
Three 3-2 the final in one overtime. St. Louis over Vancouver. We may get a double here. We'll see what Montreal can do. Another good opportunity. Puck loose in front. And then covered up.
Montreal is leaving a guy deep, even though they're on the PK. This left wing is staying pretty high and out of the zone. Breaks out very quickly, and they've almost got him on this on a dump play here a couple times.
See if we can get Knuckles back in here once he's done talking to his team. But
I'm here, bro.
Yeah, you're there that quickly.
There he is.
Well, even though you left, you still were on the broadcast because we heard a lot of you during the game.
Yeah.
I was?
A little bit, yeah. I think we heard you. Unless you have somebody else that sounds just like you on your team.
Might have been your
I was talking a little bit. The only adjustment we had to make was they kept wrapping it around and getting it, and their offense was just playing behind the net. So that's only the adjustment I was calling out there. But yeah, sweaty win. Like, it kind of went how I predicted. We controlled the offensive zone time. They got a few bounces and ended up being a good game. So I hope you enjoyed watching it.
Yeah, I mean, again, both games, and you don't know this, both games went into overtime 2-2, and now we're going double overtime for Montreal and Detroit, still tied at 2.
Is my bro in there?
Yeah.
Yeah, he is.
I'll tune in.
Excuse me.
Yeah, Detroit's starting this second overtime with a power play. And there again, that left wing is breaking out and getting behind the defense.
And Detroit, in double overtime, early double overtime, have taken this game number 4 and have been able to tie this series up at 2 apiece.
Ruh-roh.
Good job, Professor.
Just that quickly.
Telling the boys. that I was talking to Professor in a pregame interview, and he was swearing that he will not lose another game in this series. So he's holding true to his word so far. We'll see if he can win another one tomorrow night.
He hopped on pregame.
I talked to him last night, actually.
So he's guaranteeing victory.
Guaranteeing victories when he's in the lineup.
All right, we'll check
Which
one game
Moran
on the
brothers
box.
Any such, claim by yourself, or
What's that?
just your brother has the guts to make a claim?
Yeah, I mean, you got to create storylines. That's what
Absolutely.
grows leads. Storylines, and that gets the media going, and you just see growth from there.
Well, we now
So
see Detroit and Montreal tied up at 2-2 in this series, as Detroit really only having one bad game number one. Last two games, they've held Montreal to 2 goals in each one of those. And quite honestly, guys, if you can hold a team to 2, you have a really good chance of winning. And they've won 2 out of 3 of those games, now winning game number 4 in double overtime, 3-2. Meanwhile, St. Louis in control, 3-1 in their series now. An overtime game there, an overtime win by the Blues, 3-2 as well. And now you're in a situation where it's 3-1 in your series, Knucklers. And again, you had a game where 2 games now where you've really had to struggle. One in both overtime games. One, this last one, you've been able to take. But you've had a couple of games where you've played incredibly well. Is there any kind of pattern that you're seeing with your guys that you need to figure out, need to work on, and say, look, this is more of the way we need to play consistently every game?
No, I think we controlled both games tonight. I guess you can hear me during the game. The only adjustment we had to make was they were rimming it around, and our off D-man was getting beat to the puck, and then they were playing behind the net, and everybody knows playing this game, if the offensive team has the puck behind the net, that, in my opinion, is the toughest to defend. So they were creating offense from behind the net. They got that one wrap goal and then a lucky bounce on their second. But I felt like we controlled it fine, and should be good game 5. Hopefully we can close it out.
Knucklers, how impressed are you with Detroit having 2 must-win games and doing what they need to do to tie this series up? How impressed are you with them, and where do you expect this series to go?
I'm really impressed with them. They needed to get at least 1 tonight, and they got 2. So it's a new series, essentially. So really proud of that group. I'm rooting for them. Obviously have a bias to the Red Wings, but yeah, really impressive win, and like I said, I'm very happy for them.
Your guys, we're just looking at your stats right now. You, Clutch, and Average all with a goal in this game. You had a goal and 2 assists in this one as well. And getting plenty of opportunities. I think Vancouver certainly played tighter defensively, weren't taking a lot of chances. And I think we all commented, or we at least all agreed, that play on both sides seemed to have slowed down a bit. Did you get a feeling for that, where Game 4 might have been a little bit of a slower pace than Game number 3?
Game 4 is definitely tougher entering the zone, and it was a different lineup. So they were playing a little better trap, and they were holding their gaps better. So really the difference was getting easy zone entries in Game 3, which makes it look quicker, versus a slow style where they're trapping in Game 4. But we still got in fine on the entries. Game 3 was just a little bit easier, but you got to give credit to their goalie. He made a lot of saves. We were throwing pucks at the net, getting tips, trying to get those junk goals, and he shut us down for the most part. It's unfortunate how it ended. I got the poke check in there, but we'll take it.
18-10 total shots on goal in favor of St. Louis. Vancouver more physical than you guys with the hits, 15-7, but 14:06 to 5:09 time on attack, so 9-minute difference there, pretty much. And again, you guys with all that time on attack, your passing percentage at 82.5 is incredible. You don't normally see teams that high up there with so much time on attack. not a lot of shots comparative with that amount of time. But, again, I think that speaks to maybe you guys being a little more patient in this game.
And we were just taking what they were giving us. They actually played a very good defensive game in their zone and also at the blue line. So we were moving around trying to find holes, and they weren't there like they were in Game 3. So that's what you saw.
Anything to talk about coming out with Game 5 tomorrow night? Anything you have a lineup set that you could talk about, or you still haven't figured that out yet?
That's the beauty of it. I'm just playing in here, no management, so I just go about my day and don't have to make sure everybody's going to be available. I'm going to be available for all 3 tomorrow. I could play 2 of them, Game 5 or 6, and then 7 if it goes there. That's all I know. It's up to Rapel and Average to put our lineups in. So I'm sure everybody's going to be available, and we'll be ready to go.
And, guys, let's talk about the other series as well. You know, we mentioned on the east side with Detroit coming back in this series, winning 2 games, including a double overtime here in Game 4, 3-2, but really playing a Game 3 where they had as much control in Game 3 as Montreal had in Game 1, and I think we commented on that. I thought that maybe this series might be a little more even-keeled. We might not see big swings in it, but we've seen 2 games with incredible swings in what they were able to do, and it probably not as close in those 2 games that I think we probably expected out of these 2 teams. So we'll get to your opinions on that, but we want to thank White Knucklers for coming on here. He's got to take off. He already took off, so we thank him for coming on. We hope to talk to him tomorrow night. But is that a bit of a surprise, the way Detroit and Montreal have happened in these first 4, that 2 games were so one-sided between these 2 teams? I thought we might have closer games where it would be a 1-2 goal game pretty much every time.
Yeah, my big takeaway from the Montreal-Detroit series, Montreal was able to get that one really high-scoring game, but since then they are not scoring at their normal average. Detroit has found a way in both, and actually all 3 games after that first game, to hold Detroit to two-goal games, which is not normal for Montreal. So Detroit's defense is doing work. Now, Game 2, Montreal found a way to win it by holding Detroit's offense to just 1 goal. But Detroit tonight did what they needed to do to get their offense clicking, like we've seen them do before, and found a way to win these 2 games in big ways. They definitely needed this overtime win. Absolute blowout, kind of a revenge game for them. I was definitely surprised to see them score so much in that Game 3. And I'm also surprised to see that Montreal's not firing on all cylinders like we kind of expected them to. They may. I still think they have that depth that we were talking about, but this Detroit team has found a way to kind of stifle that second line's offense. It'll be interesting to see tomorrow night if the adjustments that Detroit's made is going to serve them well in Game 5 and Game 6, and go from there.
What do you think, Bess? What do you think's the key for this Detroit-Montreal series? It kind of seems like it might have been a bit of a mirage last night that Montreal had so much control. Detroit really came back and swung it back the other way. Now we're back to a 3-game series between these 2. Is it about line matches? What's the key to this series for either one of these teams?
I think line matching has something to do with it. Has a part in it. I think Detroit needs to, the way they played tonight, they need to carry that into tomorrow night. And just like I said, Vancouver should have done from Game 1 from last night that they didn't do. But well, they did. I mean, they did. But they just need to keep Montreal at bay, like they've been, like they did tonight.
And quickly, before we get going here, Blues and Canucks. Do the Canucks have any chance here? What's your thought on this series? We'll start with you, Best.
I think St. Louis is going to close it out. What I think.
Pucker.
Oh, Pucker.
Yep, he is there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. I was talking with the mic muted. The baby came in the room a second ago and was crying, so I muted the mic and I started talking. And anyway, so yes, St. Louis is doing exactly what we expected them to do. I think they'll win it in Game 5. If actually, I'm going to put it this way: whichever game White Knucklers is in. Is the game that they win, and so if he gets to play in Game 5, I think they win it in 5. If they hold him in reserve and play him in Game 6, then White Knucklers and RB Clutch combined will win this series for them, and that's a lock from me. If their other line doesn't let it win it outright, Vancouver, I really didn't expect them to win a game in this series, and They definitely impressed me with their Game 1 win, as well as being able to take this St. Louis team to overtime. So good, great job, Vancouver, and hope you find a way to make the game tomorrow night interesting, like you did tonight.
Well, once again, as we look at the playoff grid here, the Blues leading in the Western Conference Finals 3-1. And the series tied Detroit and Montreal here in this best of 7 Eastern Conference Finals. Guys, let's do this again tomorrow night, shall we?
Absolutely. It's always fun.
All right. We had thanks to Pucker and Best There Is for helping out with the broadcast tonight. We hope you folks will join us again tomorrow night. You've been watching the playoffs right here on the World E-Hockey League and our YouTube channel. We thank you for tuning in. For the cast, this is T-Sib saying so long. We'll talk to you tomorrow night for Game 5 and 6 and maybe a 7.